From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is 30 Minutes with Government with Cedric Peterson.
Hello, I'm Cedric Peterson and welcome to this edition of 30 Minutes with Government. The Office of the Ombudsman kicked off the year by holding an open house on Thursday, January 29th, where the general public were welcomed and informed about the role of the Ombudsman within our community, as provided for by the Constitution of St. Martin. The Ombudsman, Dr. Nilda Lynch Ardern, spoke to 30 Minutes with Government.
The open house has been organized to inform the people. As we know, the Ombudsman is the protector of the rights of the people and the guardian of the Constitution. As such, it is very important for the public to understand what the Ombudsman is doing, to meet the team, the bureau, the members of the Bureau of the Ombudsman. And in our open house, the people have been welcomed to see our premises, to learn more about our operation, and to learn more about the Constitution, the role of the Ombudsman as provided for by the Constitution. We gave presentations of the Constitution and the role of the Ombudsman, Parliament, the Council of Ministers, the ministerial responsibility, and our complaint procedures, so that the people know what their role as well is pertaining to our democracy. The people has an obligation to abide by the law, but also a responsibility to police the state of affairs. As such, they can always complain if something is not going well within government, and the Ombudsman will listen to the complaints, will investigate, and recommend government how to deal with the concerns of the people. The Constitution and the National Ordinance of Ombudsman provides that government is obligated to cooperate with the investigations of the Ombudsman and also follow recommendations made by the Ombudsman unless there are valid reasons not to do so, and then that can be discussed. All with all, at the end of the day, government will be functioning better, government will be giving better service to the people, and the people's interest will be taken care of in a more transparent manner. In closing, I would say again, the Ombudsman listens, investigates, and recommends government to act on the concerns of the people. The services of the Ombudsman are free.
The application process for study financing is now closed for 2015. 30 Minutes with Government spoke to Division Head of the Study Financing Department, Mr. Antonio Aventuran, who explained the next step for all applicants.
Well, the next process is that the study financing applications that meet all the criteria will be turned over to the Study Financing Advisory Body. That body is tasked specifically with advising the minister with reference to the applications. So they're going to give a positive or negative advice on the applications, and then after that is completed, we will then prepare the advices from the committee that goes to the minister, whereby the minister will decide on the application. So the ultimate decision is in the hands of the minister.
Mr. Aventuran also mentioned that the department has seen an increase in study financing requests for students who want to study in the region and the United States, while there is a decrease in students applying for study financing to the Netherlands. He also defined what it means to study in the region and gave a summary as to which areas of study the student have expressed interest in pursuing.
We saw a dramatic increase in students to study in the region, especially students wanting to go to the USA. We saw a big increase there, and a decrease in the number of students wanting to study in the Netherlands, which was predominantly our biggest area in the past. So the region is defined as the Caribbean Basin. So we're talking about the ABC Islands, Aruba, Curacao, Bonaire, St. Thomas, Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, the USA, Canada, and anywhere outside Europe basically is defined as the region. The most students applied for the USA, that's 97, followed by the Netherlands with 66, And then St. Martin is came in third with 38, followed by Canada with 21, Curacao 11, Aruba is 7, England and St. Thomas both have 3, and then France, Mexico, Scotland, and Trinidad all have 1.
Workshops are held annually for students and parents to get acquainted with the preparation process when planning to pursue tertiary education. Mr. Abenturan explained how the workshops help with this process.
First off, we're going to start off with a preparatory workshop for the students that are going to the Netherlands. The transition from St. Martin to the Netherlands is an extremely difficult one. Recent changes in the educational laws in the Netherlands has only made it even more difficult. The main issues that we try to resolve in the workshop is assist students to with language, with motivation, with orientation into the Dutch culture, because that is those are some of the biggest areas that students face challenges when they arrive in the Netherlands. We're going to be also guiding the process better this year because most of our students applying to MBO schools in the Netherlands. Last year, for example, we sent 12 students to the Netherlands, and of the 12 students that went to pursue MBO level education, only 10 actually got into the studies which they had originally indicated they wanted to go into, which means that we have to try to ensure that students are better prepared. There are also most schools now in the Netherlands require you to do an exam, admittance exam, and an intake interview before you're admitted into the school. And during the intake interview especially, they look at your motivation to pursue the study and your ability to explain why you want to pursue the study, and of course they ask you to communicate with them in Dutch, in the Dutch language, which is definitely a disadvantage for most of our students here in St. Martin. So we are looking at trying to assist the students, but key here is that the schools have to assist us in taking up this responsibility, and career guidance counselors have to provide more assistance for the students because Division Study Financing is not really capable of doing it all. We're looking at starting early March with the preparatory workshops for the group that is going to the Netherlands. Yeah, and most of those workshops are going to be conducted by Student Support Services. That's a division also within the Ministry of Education. They're going to be conducting preparatory workshops, and then in July, just before the students leave again, we're going to conduct the last preparatory workshop, which is really geared towards the transition.
Now going back to the procedure of study financing. Mm-hmm. If study financing is denied, mm-hmm. what's the procedure for handling appeals and or objections? Okay. In the event that your study financing request is denied, once you receive the ministerial decree, on the ministerial decree, the reason for the denial is listed. Once you receive that, within 6 weeks, you can file an objection or an appeal. You can object to the minister, you can file an appeal with the minister, or you can also file an appeal with the court in first instance. Yeah? That has to happen 6 weeks after receipt of the notification that you were denied. In the event that you appeal to the Minister of Education, the appeals will go to an advisory body, 3 persons who would review the case. They would conduct a hearing. So the person that filed the appeal would be invited to a hearing. During that hearing, they would have the opportunity to verbally elucidate on their case and bring forth any supporting documents. And that's very important. You have to walk with documents, any document that you think would be important to bring forth your case. And after the committee hears the case, they will prepare an advice which goes back to the minister, and the minister subsequently will decide on the case again.
Stay with us. You're watching 30 Minutes with Government.
It's that time again where we pay our motor vehicle tax and get our new license plate for the year. The following is the official price list, which includes the price of the license plate. For drivers with license plate designation M and B, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel type vehicles. For drivers of license plate designation SXM, MR, PAR, and L, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline-type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation taxi, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline-type vehicles and 562 guilders and 50 cents for diesel-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation R, you pay 312 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline-type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation bus, G and T, 35 passengers or less, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline-type vehicles and 562 guilders and 50 cents for diesel-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation bus, G and T, 35 passengers or more, you pay 1,262 guilders and 50 cents for both gasoline and diesel-type vehicles. For drivers of license plate designation V, with a weight less than 3,500 kilograms, you pay 287 guilders and 50 cents for gasoline-type vehicles and 762 guilders and 50 cents for diesel-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation V, with a weight more than 3,500 kilograms, you pay 1,262 guilders and 50 cents for both diesel and gasoline-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation Z, with a weight more than 3,500 kilograms, you pay 1,262 guilders and 50 cents for both gasoline and diesel-type vehicles. For drivers with license plate designation for motorbikes MF, you pay 207 guilders and 50 cents. For drivers with license plate designation for mopeds MF, you pay 57 guilders and 50 cents. That was the official price list, which includes the price of the license plate for 2015. Please be reminded that the deadline for paying your motor vehicle tax for 2015 is Saturday, February 28, 2015. Don't be late. Pay for your plate. This public service announcement was brought to you by the Department of Communication and the Tax Administration Receiver's Office.
In this segment of 30 Minutes with Government, we will profile the Department of Social Development and Labor, where Department Head Mrs. Peggy Ann Dross Richardson spoke to DCOM's Marsha Gums Bobertui as it relates to how the department functions under the Ministry of Healthcare, Social Development and Labor.
Both departments function in the Ministry of Public Health, Social Development and Labor. The departments have section heads. One section head is over the section of permits. One section head is over the section of labor market. Both departments also have senior officers in charge of their respective areas. One senior officer in charge of permits, that's in charge of advising on employment permits. One senior officer in charge of casework or the case workers, and one senior officer in charge of the execution of policies as it regards in particular the Department of Social Services.
Please clarify what are the responsibilities of your department?
Let me answer that question kind of twofold. The Department of Labor Affairs has as its core responsibility employment permits, and those are permits, as we know, for persons that seek employment in St. Martin that are non-nationals, so therefore persons that are not the holders of Dutch passports. The department also deals with labor registrations, or what the community knows as business registrations. We also deal with vacancy registrations, registering of those persons seeking employment. We deal with dismissal applications, so that's for companies that request dismissal of individuals or mass dismissals. We also deal with conflict resolution, so if an employee has an issue with how they're being paid, if they're not being paid, if there's breaches in the labor laws and how those are being applied, that's also dealt with by the department. As it regards social services, we also deal there with financial aid, with medical aid, legal aid, We have also social workers. We have 3 of those that deal with what we refer to as the immaterial aid, which is counseling, behavior modification plans, etc. The department, social services, is also very closely linked to third-party caregivers, which also includes Mental Health Foundation, the Turning Point, and other caregivers. The department is also charged with the crisis care unit. So for instance, when we have the burning of the City 40, I think it was referred to as City 40, and we have homes that burn down. We just had a passing of Hurricane Gonzalo, etc. That department is also dealing with that from a crisis management point of view in terms of how we meet the needs of people that are impacted by that sort of crisis.
Government services can at times be misunderstood or misinterpreted, which would make the process more difficult for citizens. Mrs. Dross Richardson highlighted some of these misinterpretations that exist as it relates to the Department of Social Development and Labor.
Well, I think, I'll have to kind of differentiate in terms of the misperceptions. I think the overriding misperception in social services is that people have the impression that if they are in need of financial aid or medical aid or legal aid, that they can just walk in and it'll just happen. We are bound by the law. Both departments are there. The tasks are embedded in an ordinance. And we do have legal timeframes and we have legal stipulations that have to be fulfilled in order to see if a person can come into consideration for medical aid, financial aid, or legal aid. So that's a big misconception, that people feel that, well, you know, I have the Dutch passport, I'll just go to that department and I must get the aid. It actually, unfortunately, because I sense the frustration from people sometimes, but that does not work like that. There are legislative requirements that we must fulfill in order to see if persons can get aid. From the Department of Labor Affairs is really, in fact, a department that has a lot of stress with pulling. There's a tug from the private sector in terms of businesses that wants our services for employment permits and business registration, and there's a significant tug as it regards persons that want our assistance with employment and with getting their issues resolved. That department has a huge misconception too, because people, you know, the business sector wants it and they want it now. You know, the private sector mentality. And we're also obliged to follow the legal framework as it regards issuing of employment permits under the national ordinance. And we're also bound with dismissal requests to a certain policy and procedure in the manner in which we execute those services. As it regards job placement, we also have misconceptions regarding that. You know, persons that are unemployed get also a bit frustrated. They want to come to the department, and you know, sometimes we feel that there's an assumption that there's a box of vacancies or a box of jobs available, and you walk in and here's a job, go and report to this XYZ business in Colby starting tomorrow. And unfortunately, and I say that not lightly, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So that's also a misconception.
When it comes to the St. Martin labor market, it is critical to take into consideration where we stand from a statistical perspective. Mrs. Dross Richardson shared the current state of affairs as it relates to our labor market based on the current statistics and what the Department of Labor is doing to remedy any issues the labor market is facing.
I'd like to start by giving some stats so that people can understand the context in which we operate, and then from there I think the stats will help you to also get an understanding of what we are perceiving and what we're understanding the labor market to be. So I'd like to refer to some stats. And I'll also include stats for financial aid, because I believe it's connected. Persons that pulling financial aid, for the most part, 60% of those persons are persons that belong to the labor market. So persons that are between the ages of 18 to the ages of 45. So for all intents and purposes, unless there's a disability of some sort, able to work. Yeah? Financial aid recipients is about 600 persons per month, to the tune of about 350,000 guilders a month that government pays out in financial aid. It's close to 4 million a year. The medical aid, we have about 1,300 recipients of what we refer to as the PayPay card. I actually don't like that phrase, because PayPay card refers to poor people card. And I really don't like that phrase, but people are familiar with it. But medical aid recipients. The crisis aid, we paid about 45,000 guilders in crisis aid last year, 2014. Employment permits, there were about 2,265 permits that were applied for, of which 1,900 of those were granted and about 353 were denied. The total registering of vacancies at the department, so these are businesses that come in and say, I have a vacancy, was 3,200 in the year 2014. However, 90% of those were tied to the prerequisite for employment permit. Okay, very, very important stat to remember. Total unemployed persons registered at the department was 215, of which 70% of those only had secondary school education. Again, an important stat to remember. The portfolio size for a job placement officer, of which we have 3, is approximately 50 to 60 unemployed persons, because you have to remember the database is a revolving one. Although we had 215 persons registered last year as unemployed, we have every year persons that roll over. It's much like the AT&T, you know, it rolls over every year. If you registered in November of 2014 but you didn't gain employment in that year, you roll over to 2015, yeah? We have total referrals, and referrals is the total amount of times that those persons were referred to jobs was about 415 referrals, and that includes multiple referrals for the one person. So job placement officers kept referring persons to jobs. Of the 415 referrals, approximately 50 of those persons gained employment. Now, let me stop here a bit, Marsha, because you can understand that when you read these stats and you see that, you say, well, that's a low amount of people that got employed. It's actually a high amount. The department job placement did a fantastic job in that regard, because over the past 3 years, from a single digit, we now have a double-digit successful performance in getting persons sustainable employment. But that's always hampered by the fact that the vacancies that we get are not, in fact, what we refer to as true vacancies, because 90% of those vacancies are tied to employment permits. Yeah, very important aspect. Dismissal requests was about 44 cases. Total complaints, and so that's people coming in to complain about, I didn't get pay right, I'm not getting my vacation, I didn't get my pay slip, was about 388. And again, employment permits, there's a success rate there now of us being able to execute employment permits, and all the legislative time frames tied to that well within the 6 weeks turnaround time. Now, getting back to your question in terms of how we perceive the labor market, we believe the labor market as, and this is not my belief, this is what the stats show. The labor market as we perceive it has been a bit tainted. Yeah, and I use that word carefully, because we need to be careful what we're saying here. But it has been tainted because we have what we consider to be a mismatch. So there are vacancies that are coming in, and I'm using just example positions. I'm not going to refer to any particular company at all. But I'm just going to say in general, we have a vacancy that comes in for a gemologist. Yeah? And then we have registered persons at the department that only have secondary school education, coming, for instance, from the Academy, Sundial School, GED, St. Dominic, and CIA, Learning Unlimited, our secondary schools, MPC, that actually don't have a gemologist degree. But we have a private company coming in to apply for a gemologist, requesting only secondary school education for that person, but requesting that the person have skills in the task having to do with a gemologist. So I don't know if that answers the question in terms of the labor market. Our people, and when I say our people, I always get, what do you mean by our people? Well, by our people, I mean, first of all, the Dutch national. And then when I say our people, I mean Dutch nationals that are residing in St. Martin. Because I have to remember the legislative framework when I say our people. Are placed at a disadvantage because there's a mismatch in terms of the requirement in the labor market and what we are able to offer them, for the most part, not exclusively, but for the most part. And that's basically a deduction from the statistical information we have over even the past 3 to 4 years. Long-winded answer for a question. I do understand.
But what is your department doing to curb this situation?
We've, over the past 3 years, I've started at the Labor Department in 2011, November 2011. So I'm actually in my 3rd year now, and started at Social Services in December of 2012. I told my staff in the beginning of this year that the past 2.5 years, I think we've laid the foundation in terms of ensuring that we have systems in place. 2015 is going to be the year of accountability. Across the board, accountability for how we render services and placing accountability as well on every single person that comes in requesting our assistance, because I do believe that there needs to be accountability with clients as well. Yeah. One of the major things that we've done in the interim is we've introduced CRM, which is a customer relationship management software introduced by us by Computech, and I have to give my credit and kudos to that company for introducing us to that through our internal ICT department. That software is enabling us to focus primarily on clients. So our services will become client-centered. Let me just explain it in a nutshell. One client comes in, that client's name is, I'll just use you as an example, Marsha. Marsha comes into those departments, we do the intake, we have her information. We need to do a needs assessment. We need to understand what Marsha needs. Does Marsha need financial aid? Does she need medical coverage for her and her dependents? Do she need legal aid to resolve an issue that she has with her employer? Does she need employment? If she's not ready for the labor market, do we need to put her with a social worker? If that social worker can't help her, do we need to refer her to Mental Health Foundation? Is there another issue going on there? Is she addicted? Do we need to refer her to Turning Point? Do we need to put a behavior modification plan in place? Do we need to put her in an adult training program that we're establishing and have established through the Job Coach in 2014? And then we tied that all together. Our 2014 was the year that we coined the phrase putting people first, and 2015 we've coined the phrase because it matters. Because we need to be able to answer the question between those two departments, why are we doing what we are doing for the individual clients? And we're doing it because it matters.
Truly an insightful interview. The Department of Communication will be bringing you the full interview with the head of the Department of Social Development and Labor, Mrs. Peggy Ann Dross Richardson, in a subsequent broadcast. That brings us to the end of this edition of 30 Minutes with Government. For video on demand of this and all DCOM programming, we invite you to visit the official government website, www.stmartingov.org. I'm Cedric Peterson. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, thanks for watching.